Great. So, today's lecture, we're going to try very, very hard to come full circle on everything, on an introduction to everything you need to know to build a full interactive dynamic web app. We have a long ways to go on that front. We certainly won't get through everything in detail, so we'll see how far we get. Thankfully, we have Rio the following weeks to fill in all of the holes that I leave today and have left the other days. He's got definitely the much harder work than I have had. But this is the last official lecture, so certainly you will have at least been exposed to everything enough to make you dangerous after this lecture. But maybe make you very dangerous. I don't know. Great. So today's lecture has really two parts. The first is to finally cover something that was supposed to fit in the last lecture, and that's an introduction to a framework called jQuery Mobile, which is a framework for prototyping, or not just prototyping, building real mobile web pages very quickly. So web pages that react well to the size of a browser and that sort of thing. It's a very heavyweight framework, so there's some things that are super easy to do in it, and there are other things that are really hard to do in it. You sort of get that low threshold, low ceiling sort of thing. But it may be a great starting and jumping off point for a lot of your prototyping. So we're going to do that. And then we're going to transition to talking a lot more about, so everything we've seen so far has really been building interactivity in JavaScript, which, as you know, none of that stuff lives around. As soon as you hit reload in your web browser, anything you've interacted with is gone. So we're going to talk more about putting computation on the server and having things that persist and last a long time, and how we can store data and access that data more easily. So we'll talk about a language called PHP, which is a server-side programming language that will let you create interactive things on the server, and also we'll talk about databases today. There is an entire course on there are many courses on relational databases, so we really won't cover all of the details of a relational database, but we'll try and, again, make you dangerous. And just, again, go through hooking everything together. And if we're really lucky, we'll get to talking about Ajax. Hopefully, ideally, at the end of class, we'll have the code for a full working chat room that stores all of its data on the server and updates via this Ajax paradigm and so forth. The odds that we'll get that far are small, but we'll do the best we can. I also have to leave at exactly 4 p.m. today, and so I will wrap up about 3:50 in case folks have individual questions that they want to talk about. So that's the plan. Any questions? Awesome. All right, so again, this helpful resources page has helpful resources on it. I added just a few things this time. So a few things on PHP and SQL, which we'll talk about later. Also, the documentation for jQuery Mobile, which we are going to be talking about first today, is linked right there. You can obviously find it via Google as well. And you can check out code for this class. Just like always, it'll be in Lecture 3. And I'm going to do that right now. So, yeah, all right, and I'll be working at this link, so you can open that up and follow along. And so one thing I should note in following along is one of the things we'll be building today is a chat room. So if you all follow along in mine and type stuff in it, it will get really chaotic. And so you probably won't want to do that, because if I can't teach, then I won't teach. But that's part of, if I'm going to show you something working on the web, it has to sort of be out there on the web. So following along in your own code is probably going to be the thing that's most effective today. Great. So let's get going on the jQuery Mobile front. So the file I'll be working in is called jmstart. When you open that up, you'll be like, boy, that's a boring page. And we have the goal of making it a more interesting page. So jQuery Mobile, like I said, is this mobile framework. It really has nothing to do with jQuery, which we talked about last time. It's made by the same people, and jQuery came out first and was really popular, and everybody knew the name, and so they reused the name. jQuery is really about this, connecting data to the web page. jQuery Mobile is about creating mobile user interfaces, so they're really sort of at different points in the development process, I guess. But as this salacious image suggests, the goal is to help you build web pages that sort of look like native or well-made things for mobile devices. And they ought to, in jQuery Mobile's mind, transition between devices really well and things like that. So jQuery Mobile had this fantastic idea that they would make their documentation a giant demo of their system, which is interesting, but not a really good idea. But anyway, they did it. So if you go to this web page, this is a jQuery Mobile website. This is something you could build with their jQuery Mobile framework. It does things like if you make it smaller, it reformats to how you might want it on a phone instead of a tablet. And that's one of the things that jQuery Mobile makes it easy to do. It's also got these slick transitions. If we click Introduction to jQuery Mobile, well, you couldn't really see it on this, but if this were not also trying to record the screen, you would have saw it slide sideways, or if somebody would have bought me a more expensive computer. But that's neither here nor there. And so it's got transitions between everything that are supposed to look slick. There, you kind of saw it there. They're accelerated on your phone. They use all this stuff that goes fast on your phone, that sort of thing. I'm going to go ahead and make this big again so that we can see slightly more stuff. So basically, these are all. This is a user interface thing, and there are lots and lots of user interface components. So how to create toolbars. If you want to create nav bars, you can click on that, and you can learn about all the things, all the different options you can have for nav bars. Especially this beer icon. You want to use that. And so forth. How you create forms. How you create. How you make the content flow back and forth between different grids and things like that. How you theme things. There's all kinds of stuff in there, so you can explore around. I'm going to show you how to build a really simple page and not spend a ton of time on it today, just so you can get a sense for how this sort of thing works. So if we go into the pages and dialogues, we can look at something like the single page template. So that's the problem with the jQuery mobile documentation is sometimes you click on stuff and it's like the running example, and other times it's explanations of how the running example works. So you actually want to click on anatomy of a page to understand how this works. So there's a whole bunch of detail here, but we'll go for this. We'll just skip to the code. And we'll go for this basic single page template. All right. So I'm going to load up. So if I go into lecture 3 and open up jQuery Mobile JM start. I have a few things in this file already. So this is your basic HTML file. It's got a doc type in here, which is just sort of metadata that says that it's HTML. If you don't include that line in your jQuery mobile project, it won't work, and that will take you forever to debug. And there's a couple other things in here. So mobile devices read this information called some of this metadata information. This defines what size the viewport should be. So like, sometimes on websites on your mobile phone you can zoom in by pinching, and sometimes they're like stuck to the device width. This is what sets it to being stuck to the device width, so it seems more like something that's built for that size. And then there's a couple links to things. So there's a jQuery mobile CSS file. Remember, this is exactly how we were linking our own CSS files in before, just a different URL, and a couple JavaScript files. So you can see that jQuery Mobile does indeed include jQuery. So you can use all the great stuff you learned in jQuery as well in this. So you include those two things, and you see that if we look in here, sure enough, that came from exactly this. And so, so something's got to go in the actual body section of the page. So anything we put in there is what our page is going to be. And jQuery Mobile has this interesting notion that it defines individual pages in your app as divs. And so we see right here that there's this div that says data role page. And so I'll paste that in. And so now, let's just go ahead and look at what we've got here. So we reload that, and we see something that's not all that exciting, but it's got a footer, it's got a header, and it is something that you can imagine would look good on a mobile device. So that's nice, and we got all of this formatting and styling for free. And if we changed themes on jQuery Mobile's website, or on using jQuery Mobile's theming engine, it would look different because all of that's built into the CSS. Anyway, so now we've got this really, really simple page. I'm going to go ahead and tear this off into a separate browser so we can keep it small and keep our documentation large. And you could view this on your, your iPhone. If you went to that same URL from your iPhone, and it would look super duper. All right. So that's sort of what one page looks like. We can edit this and say my header. And the footer. Nothing too exciting there. Those are where those things are mapped. Obviously, nothing too surprising. So the main point I want to get across here is that pages do not have jQuery mobile pages do not have a one-to-one mapping with HTML files. So one way you can create another page in jQuery mobile is to simply add another div to this document. So if we add another div, if we go and look at this example, it says start of the second page. If we go and copy that part, and now we've got another page. And the way it keeps track of pages is using the ID of the page. So this div, it says its data role is page. We see other divs have different data roles. Data role is a concept that jQuery Mobile introduced. jQuery Mobile uses, in the back end, it uses jQuery to go through all of these things, look up the data roles, and decide what actually to do to the div. So it rewrites all of this HTML on the fly. So we've got a second page. Its ID is bar. We ought to give, if you're going to have more than one page, you ought to give all of the pages an ID. So we'll give this one ID food. And indeed, that's exactly what they did in this example. And then, if we wanted to create a link to another page, we could say, let's go to another page. And we could add in a link to that. So we need to figure out what to put in here to make a link to another page, right? So normally, if you're just building a regular website, you type in some file name here, and you put your other page on a separate file. jQuery uses a convention where they link to other pages that are defined elsewhere. So, for example, link to this bar page by putting a hash sign and then the ID. So you use #bar. And you may be aware that that's a convention for linking within pages on regular HTML pages. So, when you have a table of contents on a Wikipedia page and you click on something that, uses one of those hash links. So it's the same sort of idea. jQuery Mobile will capture clicking on these links and replace all of the page content with the correct new page content. So we can do that. So we'll save that, and we'll take a look and see what we've got here. So we've got now a link that says let's go to another page. When we click on that, we automatically, for free, get this nice animation to another page. It thankfully already had a link back to the first page, and so forth. So you'll note something that was, so just to give you a little bit more of an idea of the types of ways so all of this is the same file, and the file I'm editing is called jmstart. So you should be able to go into let me make this a little bigger so you can see the full URL right now. You should be able to go into my Lecture 3 directory. You'll see a whole bunch of things there, and if you open up jmstart, it should look like this. That's interesting. I don't know what to tell you. I think. Yes, that is true. So I'm changing files in the CS Lab working directory, lab-working. If you go here, if you leave working off, you will see files that are not changing. So yes, that is the problem you're experiencing. Great, I'm glad that was not a bigger issue. Great, so just to give you an idea of the way that you change things in jQuery Mobile. We'll notice that we get this transition to the left when we click on this, and when we go back, we get this transition to the left. That seems a little strange. So jQuery Mobile has all of these ways of ascribing things to actions that you do, much like this data role type of thing. We can put, and you'll see this in the jQuery documentation as you start to browse it. We can put data direction equals reverse. And that is in the jQuery Mobile documentation. You'll see all kinds of these sorts of things. They just they change interactions by adding attributes to the thing you're dealing with. So this happens to be how you change that. And it should be the case now that if we go to another page, it goes forward, and if we click back, it reverses the other way. So from an interaction design standpoint, it's more logical how it flows back and forth. So like I said, we don't have a ton of time today. I want to show you just one more thing to sort of drive that point home. Again, just give you enough to be dangerous with jQuery Mobile. So let's talk about putting in buttons and see kind of how that works. Let's go up here into the content region and go back over here, go home, and look at buttons. We'll go to basic buttons, and there's all kinds of different buttons you can have here. And you'll see that buttons are interesting because unlike how you might do it in HTML where you use a button or a submit object or something like that, all of these things are, again, just link objects. So it uses pretty much the most basic HTML objects to make all of these things, and then adds attributes like data role button to change what they are rendered like when they appear in the browser. So we can do something like this, and we can put it right here, and we can maybe put it inside a paragraph tag, and instead of going to index.html, we'll have this also go to bar. And so now, when we reload our page, because that link had the data role button, even though everything else is the same as this other link, it renders it as a button. But then when you click on it, it does this nice little animation where it changes color, and then it does the side movement to the side. Great. So those same sorts of properties with links happen when you put them, for example, inside something with data role header. So where things end up, what kind of div they end up in, whether they end up in something with a header data role or a content data role or a footer data role. If we put a link in here, something like and then so if we put a link in here and we say so we could do href equals foo and data direction equals reverse again, and we'll say back. Great. So now when we reload this and we click this, we see we get a back button. Even though we didn't say that we needed a button, we just put a link in there. Because of the fact that it's inside this data role header, it renders things in that style. Great. So I think I realize that is a very brief introduction to jQuery Mobile, but it sort of gives you an idea of the way it operates. So the fact that these things end up in these data roles or other attributes inside the HTML, and those are the things that are controlling how it's rendered and how it functions. And also the notion that these divs, which are pages, don't have a one-to-one mapping with HTML files. You might put more than one, jQuery Mobile page inside an HTML page. If you put so if you still have a same link to, if you had another link on this page to bar, it would stay on this page when you click that link. So if we put in this same link on this page, where it's pointing to bar, which is the name of the second page, it will probably do, I'm not entirely sure what it'll do, it will probably still do the animation, but it will stay on the bar page. One thing to note is the fact that you're on the bar page also gets stored in your URL. And so if you reload this, you'll stay on the second page because that's captured in the URL there. So if you want to go back to the first page, you need to change the URL or click a back button or something like that. Great. So I realize that's a 30,000-foot overview of this. There's lots and lots of documentation, and hopefully that gives you an idea of sort of how to think about the examples that you will read in there. Are there any questions before we move on? Mm-hmm. Sure. No problem. Yep, so there's a whole theming section. If you go here and you go theme framework, this will tell you all about having different color themes and how to do theming and changing colors and that sort of thing. Everything you could want to know. So learn about page theming. This tells you how to do it. All kinds of different beautiful. Don't make your website yellow. But other than that, they're all beautiful.
Where's the line of code where it actually makes the button action?
I'm not exactly sure I understand your question,
So
but
if I click on the button, I'm getting an error like that. How do I where's the line of code where I click a button and it just
so that's so you must have slightly different code than I have if there's an error. And this actually points to one of the I mean, I don't mean that to sound pretentious. This code just happens to be working. I have lots of errors in my code. So what actually happens when one of these pages loads is there's some code in this JavaScript file that goes and looks at all the stuff that started out on the web page. And it goes through and says, okay, well, I'm going to look for all of the objects that are data role buttons. And I'm going to attach JavaScript code to them that does something, that transitions to a page, that makes this animation happen, that makes something happen when you click the link, that makes the button change colors, all these things. It attaches that automatically. So you don't write that code. That code is injected into your page. And you can see that if you go in here and you open up the, so if you go to View, Developer, Developer Tools, and you do something like, this is always a dangerous thing to do, but if you inspect this, you see that there's this span around it. There's all kinds of code in here that you didn't write. There's just tons of it. And there happens to be this span around this that defines what the button should look like. So it defines that there should be corners around all of it. And then if we dive in here, there's this span that you didn't write that surrounds the text and styles the text. There's also all these different classes that have been added to this href link. And there is certainly JavaScript bound to them. I don't know how you see that. There's all this stuff that happens under the covers that makes that stuff happen. Does that sort of answer your question? Yeah. Okay. So like I said, this is something where when it's working well, it's very easy to prototype with these things because you end up writing very simple HTML for all of the amazing things that are happening in this single application with one button. You really don't write a lot of code here. I mean, the only elements you're using are a few divs, a few paragraph tags, and a few anchor tags, a few link tags. And all this stuff happens, and it reformats for different devices and that sort of thing. That being said, when something breaks with this, it's very hard to debug because all of the code that's generated here is not code you wrote. This doesn't look anything like the code you wrote. And so it makes inspection into things and debugging and finding what's wrong very difficult. So that's another reason that I'm not spending a ton of time on this because it may end up not being the most suitable thing for you. When you really decide on exactly what you want your app to look like and function like, and you have all these really intricate, interesting interactions that you want to create, creating those interactions inside this framework may prove challenging. It all depends what kind of app you're trying to build. If you're trying to build one that's highly visually interactive, probably jQuery Mobile is not the thing you want to use. You probably just want to start from scratch and build your own thing. If you're building an app that's, for example, much more about the social interactions that happen around it, and the UI on the phone is not a particularly novel part of what you're building, then jQuery Mobile might be something really great to use. So I'm introducing it as a possible tool for either rapid prototyping or building more simple user interfaces, things like that. Any questions? Great. Rio is going to give us a brief interlude while I get ready to go on the PHP front. We'll transition to that. So do you want to talk about stuff?
I'll use that laptop.
Yeah, that'll be easier.
So I have two things to show you. One of which is cool. Well, both of which are cool. If you go into your account, okay, that did not work. And is it under accounts? Nice. If you go into your account, there is something called a tech support request thing. Basically, what it lets you do is it lets you make a request if there's something wrong with your MySQL or PHP or your setup, something's wrong. It'll create a request for us. What's neat was that I developed that and recorded how to develop it during the course of an hour. Basically, it has all the features that some of which Joel will talk in the second part of this lecture, but basically it ties in both CSS, so there's a bit of CSS, there's a bit of PHP, there's a lot of database stuff going on in the backend, and there's some UI stuff that's styling and using, copying code from places and using them, repurposing code. So I actually have a video of that available and the source materials for this. I will make those available after the classes. They're more relevant to what Joel covered. But what's nice, so just to do a quick demo, I'm going to say this is a demo. And what it does is it actually, problem. It's not working. All right, so it should actually be making a AJAX request. Okay. So it just gets submitted, appended as it goes in the back end. And from the backend perspective, and there's also a separate backend, and obviously this is a bad password mechanism, but you can take a look at what requests are pending and mark them as resolved. So the whole process is pretty simple to do, but it's a nice tying in of everything that you want, a round trip, if you will, and it's a little more technical than some other things. So that's one thing. The second thing is a bit of a polling of if A, you think you would be interested in coming to additional lectures, hopefully the answer to that is yes. And if that answer is indeed yes, what sort of materials you would like to cover. I've heard some requests about JavaScript and going a little bit more into detail about the cool things that JavaScript can do. If by happenstance we can't get over to AJAX, we can go spend some time on that. But are there other topics that you would think that you want to, out of your own curiosity or for your own projects? It would help me very much to know, okay, this has use for one particular person, so then it may be useful for others. I've listed some things here as just a, so this may or may not be useful, but the ability to identify a browser automatically can be pretty useful. So if you render the same exact page on a mobile phone versus a web page, you get two different versions without having to do all sorts of finagling. For those of you who aren't very familiar or comfortable with Photoshop, some of these aspects would make your UIs a lot more presentable and a lot more snazzy, so I could do a demo of that. We could go into jQuery Mobile a little more in depth and maybe branch out to other alternatives as well, but sort of go into an application of jQuery from start to finish. Or we could just do JavaScript. Any thoughts, any preferences? Yes? Number 3?
Again, some interest in that.
Yep. Sweet.
That's
Okay, well, so I get the sense that these are going to be useful. Is that the general sense? And so would you come if I did cover that? Awesome. And are there any additional things that I could list on this so that then I can make it a little more coherent? Yeah.
Even though it's
Yes. Ooh, that's great. So in connection to that HTML5 and CSS3, you'll notice that this actually does use CSS3. It's really in. This is a nice jQuery mobile version as well. Yep. Movies? Ruby. Yes, we could. It's above and beyond. I must admit, my first interaction with Ruby was this past summer, so I'll see if there are other people who might be interested also in the room. That'd be interesting. Yeah. Ooh, that is pretty neat. Okay, so we're getting into more robust tools. Yeah, definitely that's a cool avenue to go through. If you're going to think about scalability, you definitely want to continue there. Okay, well, go.
We will be talking about that someday, but I guarantee you we won't talk about it enough. So, I mean, building on that, my sense is that there's going to be sort of two types of topics you'd like to ask, two classes of topics you'd like to ask for help from real on another. One of them is things we talked about in class but didn't go into enough depth in, which is probably everything. I mean, there's lots more to learn about everything we talked about. And I make no claim that we've covered anything thoroughly. And then there's going to be things that seem particularly useful for your project. So things like Photoshop or A/B testing or geolocation on the phone. If you're building, if you're building an application where location is important, how to do that geolocation with jQuery mobile or other things. There's lots of things like that. How to hook up to Twitter if you want to do something with Twitter or other social things. Those sorts of things we aren't even going to start talking about today. And I think my sense is that a lot of the things you can think of now are things that we didn't cover in enough depth yet. A lot of the things that are like geolocation or something like that probably won't come up until you get further on in your project. So I think emailing CS147L at CS is the right way to request it.
Definitely. Awesome.
Unless you have some other way.
No, I think that's perfectly the best channel. If you'd like to submit a technical support request with that also works. And so I envisage at least 3 more sections, at least covering these materials. If I think I can cover most of them, maybe not Ruby on Rails as much as I'd like to, but if there is continued interest, and if you can bring more people in, that would be good. But no. It'll be exciting. So we'll focus on those. I'll create an additional rubric on how things are going to pan out for the next at least three, 2:15 to 3:30 sections. And so if you feel like some of these are less applicable,
and they'll all be recorded as well.
Yes.
So,
yep.
And yes, you just mentioned, so the following session is only going to be 2:15 to 3:30.
That's correct. Yep.
It's Friday afternoon.
Yes. What does it mean in 1.7? I'm grading your stuff.
So leave class happily.
Yes.
Great. So just to recap, if your account is broken, make sure you complain about it through this technical support request rather than complaining about it over email. Because I certainly can't keep the email straight, and that means that stuff doesn't get fixed. And so this will be a more organized way of doing it. But also, since this is a perfect example of a web app, watch the video if you want to learn more about sort of coming full circle on how you would build something. This is a really nicely sized thing, and it's awesome that Rio did that. Any questions? Excellent. All right, so now we're going to transition to talking about PHP. And so before we go there, I want to re-bring up this fantastic diagram that I made. So we've still basically only talked about the fact that we have a browser and we communicate over HTTP, right? And all these have been static pages, and all the interactivity is happening with JavaScript on the client. And once you hit reload, it's all gone. All right, so it's very clear that web applications in the real world are not that way. And what we're going to be doing is writing code that runs on the server and persists and keeps things there. And so the language we're in particular going to use is PHP. There are lots of other languages that people use, so things that came up in these questions. Ruby is a language that people use, and they use a framework with Ruby called Rails. So that's why you often hear the phrase Ruby on Rails. Another popular language is Python. and they use a lot of people use a framework with that called Django, D-J-A-N-G-O, just like Django Reinhardt, although not related. Yeah, and so there's all these frameworks to use. PHP is by far, I would say, the simplest, but in some sense the least powerful, though up until probably recently, Facebook built everything on PHP. So it's not like it's for babies, unless Facebook is. I don't know. There's lots of great and lots of terrible things about PHP, but getting it up and running is easiest. And I think, I mean, I still prototype tons of things in PHP. It's the fastest way to get running. Yeah, and so. One thing that a lot of people do is they try and keep the web server itself what you might call stateless. So none of the state of an application lives in sort of the web application. The web application code just, whenever you make a request to the web server, it runs once, runs to completion, and outputs your HTML or whatever else to the client, and then the web server is done running. And that's really nice to do because then if you need 100 web servers because, your application is the most popular thing in the world, it's really easy to replicate that because you don't have any of the state in any web server. And so another reason that's important is if you have 100 web servers, it might be the case that when I request page 1 from my mobile device, it goes to web server 37, and when I request the next page, it goes to web server 57 because there's some load balancer in front. So lots of people try and keep their actual web application stateless, and then they store everything somewhere else. And a common place to store that is in a database. And the database system we'll be talking about is called MySQL. There are other ones. There's another open source one called Postgres. There's also a really simple one that just stores itself in a file on your server called SQLite, SQLite. And that's pretty widely used too. Like for example, lots of applications embed SQLite. For example, Firefox stores all of its bookmarks in a SQLite database. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And that means we need to talk about a whole bunch of other things. We need to talk about yet another programming language called SQL, which lets us interface between the web server and the database. And it also means we need to talk about some way for the application, your web application, your JavaScript, to get data from the server without going to a whole new web page, without the whole web page going away and going to a new website. And that's done using a paradigm called AJAX. And so hopefully we will talk about all of those things. Does everybody understand why this stuff is necessary and very approximately what it is? Or does anybody have questions? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to give you a very high-level introduction to AJAX, when you open up your browser and you type in a URL, your web browser knows how to request whatever you type from the web server. So there's some URL, and it sends off what's called an HTTP request. That's why you put HTTP at the beginning. That has some particular protocol, and that goes off to the web server and says, "I want this document." Now, AJAX is sort of a meaningless acronym now, but what it is it's a way for JavaScript code in your document to do the exact same thing that the web browser does when you type in a URL. So there's a JavaScript AJAX call you can make. There's libraries that make this easier. So there's one in jQuery. There's an AJAX call in jQuery where you give it a URL just like you type into your browser, and it goes to the web server to that URL and requests information, and it comes back as text as the data of a variable in JavaScript. So you essentially go and get some other web URL as data in JavaScript while your page is already loaded. And that paradigm of programming, doing that as the application is running, is called AJAX. It's called AJAX because AJAX stands for asynchronous JavaScript and XML. And the asynchronous part means that when you make the request in JavaScript, it happens asynchronously. So you say the URL you want, and you give it a function that's a callback, and your function returns, and life continues on. And then whenever that comes back from the server, it calls that callback. So that's the asynchronous part. You get the JavaScript part. You know what the word "and" means. And the XML part is people used to, when this started out, return XML from the web server because it was easy for browsers to parse. Now they use many other data formats, so the X is sort of meaningless. But that's where it comes from. But it's using the same protocols. It's using HTTP, just like your web server does, or your web browser does, and it's communicating with the web server. Does that make sense? Great. Any other questions about this graphic? All right, so let's learn what relational databases are and learn 2 more programming languages. Actually, the databases thing is not the next step. So the next step is to talk just kind of about PHP. So PHP is great to learn because it goes inside essentially an HTML file. There's a file in here called PHP example start, and it ends in .php. So there's this magical thing that will happen on your web server that if you have a file that ends in .php instead of .html, the web server knows that before it serves that page to whoever requested it, it should execute all of the code in that page. So an HTML page, it just gets the data off of the disk and sends that data out. PHP, instead, it routes it through this PHP interpreter that's running on the server and executes that code. So we load this up, and it looks like an HTML page. So now if you, in your browser here, go to, where is this? Here we go. You go to PHP example start. We get this great web page that has nothing in it. So PHP is great because you can simply scatter PHP code within the rest of your document. So we've got PHP example, and PHP adds some tags to the HTML tag syntax. And so the way you start writing PHP is you do an open bracket like this, you type a question mark, you type PHP, and then anything you write in here is PHP code, and then you end this tag with another question mark and a closed angle bracket. So anything we write in here will be PHP. And so the simplest thing we can do is we can say echo 1 plus 1, right? And we need a semicolon. PHP is a pretty rigid language, unlike JavaScript where you can leave the semicolon off. You must put it in here. So we can do echo 1 plus 1. And we sure enough get 2. And that computation is happening on the server side. So if we go and we do view page source, view source, this is exactly what came from the web server. The client didn't have to do anything. It got the number 2. It did not see the number 1. So all of that code is running before anything is sent to the client, to the web browser. And that's a really important distinction to understand. The difference between things that get executed on the server before the client sees it and things that get executed in the client. We could have produced this same web page by writing some JavaScript that added 1 and 1 and then wrote that to the website, put it in a div using jQuery or anything like that. So understanding that distinction is important. Does anybody have any questions about that? Excellent. All right, so we've written our first really exciting PHP. Now, how the heck are you going to learn how PHP works? Well, I'm going to show you a few really simple aspects of the language now, but all of the documentation, all of sort of the canonical documentation lives at php.net, and you can get to that. You can get to the sort of sub-page where it all lives by clicking on this. This is the English manual. There are other languages if you don't speak English. And the 2 sections that you probably care most about are the language reference, so you can learn how these things work, like how you define a function. Functions look like this. And PHP's documentation is great because it is chock full of examples. There are tons and tons of examples for everything. So you'll probably care about the language reference section, and you'll probably care about the function reference section. So the function reference section is everything that's built into sort of the PHP framework. So if you care about text processing, you can find all kinds of things about dealing with strings, like how to explode a string into an array. And it's all in here and has excellent examples. All these examples you can copy and paste in, and they run. And they tell you what they do. So anyway, so let's talk a little bit more about the language. So going over here. There are lots of annoying things about PHP's language. One of them is that variable names have to start with a $sign. And that comes from the Perl world. Perl is the language that introduced that. That may not be true, but Perl does it as well. So we can do something like x equals world. Right? So strings in PHP can be either single quotes or double quotes. And another annoying thing about the language, single quotes and double quotes are different. So we'll talk about that in a second. But we can say hello world. And so now, so another thing that's useful to do is if you're just writing some PHP that you just want to echo things out, rather than having to write lots of HTML like always write paragraph tags, you can just put everything inside pre tags. And pre is an HTML tag that just renders things sort of verbatim. So if there are line breaks, it will render those line breaks as line breaks and that sort of thing. So I'll wrap that in a pre tag. So we say x equals hello world. And so now, one of the great things about PHP is that if you have a string that you use double quotes with and you type hello, and then you type a variable name, like hello x, like that, what it does is it substitutes the value of x in for this. And that is why you have to have variable names start with a $sign. So the fact that every variable name starts with a $sign means that the interpreter can easily figure out how to do these substitutions. So if you type hello $x, we can now reload this, and you see that it prints out hello world. So nothing too exciting there, but PHP allows you to do that kind of substitution. Now,
what happens if you write hello plus $x outside of quotes?
So that's a great question. So if you do that, like that, this will unfortunately break, or print 0. It's not exactly what I expected to have happen, but it doesn't do what you'd expect, I guess is the point. And the reason for that is that another annoying thing about the PHP language is that unlike most languages where you can concatenate strings with plus, you have to use a period to concatenate strings in PHP. That is also true in Perl. Yeah, so plus adds things, and it tries to convert both of these things to integers, which is why you got 0. I would not have guessed you'd get 0, but the point is you don't get what you want. So this should work. So I apologize that there are these annoying things about the language, but I didn't make it. Some guy at Yahoo did.
So, like, if you did like hello, like $sign, why does it get a variable?
So every variable is just defined to none by default. If you try and access a variable, it'll be defined to null, I think it's called in PHP, or it might be none.
So we can use like special connectors for like physical values.
I understand your question. Okay, so so we've been using these double quotes. So let's restore this to hello x. What happens if we do? And I'm also going to add a line break in here, so you can write line breaks with like you escape new lines in other languages, so /n. So you can do echo, and let's use single quotes here. Goodbye, rule $x. We do that. Oh, and let's put a new line in here as well. Great. So now if we reload this, we see that we get actually the literal thing we typed. So if you use single quotes, then nothing gets substituted, and in fact, not even escape characters work. So the literal thing you type in single quotes gets printed out. Does that make sense? Great. All right. So we've got some code there. So now, doing computation on the server is only really useful if you can get some sort of input from the user. And so input from the user can come in one of two ways. So I'm sure whenever you've done a Google search, you're used to seeing this stuff stuck at the end of your URL, this stuff after the question mark. And that's called the query string. And the query string has this format, that parameters in the query string are separated by ampersands, and every parameter has a name and a value. Right? And so a great thing about PHP is it makes it really easy for you to access those parameters. And they get mapped into a global variable that's called $, because everything starts with $, underscore, because it's sort of a convention in PHP that things that are defined by the server start with underscores, and then in all caps, get. So those are the get variables. And they're called get variables because there's lots of ways. This gets back to how the HTTP protocol is constructed. But there are lots of ways that a server can request data from, or ways that a browser can request data from the server. And one is called a GET request. And in a GET request, the only way you can send parameters is in the URL. So that's why it's got the name GET. Right. So let's print out the GET parameters we get. So we can say echo, you sent me these GET parameters. Put a new line in there. All right, and then, so one useful debugging thing in PHP is that you can print out the value and type of any variable by typing bar underscore dump and then putting the variable name. Great, so now if we run this, we get a parse error. So I'm going to pretend like I intended to do that. So debugging PHP is kind of a challenging thing to do. Usually when you make an error, it will print out some sort of cryptic error to the browser. Sometimes it won't, and you have to hunt around and put echo statements in your code and try and figure out where your error is. And I'm sorry to say that I don't have a better solution for you. But anyway, this tells you that something happened on or around line 16. So if we look at line 16, indeed, almost always, if you see something about expecting a semicolon, that means that your error was on the prior line because you didn't have one in the prior line. So I forgot a semicolon, and that's what happened. Great. Oh yeah, we need another new line here so we can read what's going on. Right, so you sent me these get parameters, and it says get is an array of length 0, because we didn't put any in there. We put some in there, foo equals bar. We see that we have an array that has one thing in it, foo and bar. So now all of a sudden we can get data into our script to do stuff with. So we could do something like, we could do echo get, and then the way you access these elements is through regular array notation like you would in another language, and you can say something like foo plus 1. And it tries to figure out what type something is, so if it's a string, or if it's a number, it will try and convert it to a number, and so hopefully we will get one more than the value we put in. So if we put in 6, we printed out 7 here. So that's how you can start to compute on the data that that you pass in to the server. Does that make sense? Any questions? Great. I'm sure this is seeming very exciting that now you can create something that adds numbers. All right, so let's talk about some more exciting features of PHP. So as you've noticed, PHP can sort of be interspersed with HTML, and that gives you some power. So something we could do is, say we wanted to create a list with 10 elements in it. So we can start an unordered list and end our unordered lists, and if we put a list item in here, item 1. Great, so let's see what we got here. We got a list with 1 item. So what you can do is you can intersperse PHP around that to loop over that code and generate it many times. So what we can do, and this looks really messy, but believe it or not, it's the way some people think you should do things. So we can start some PHP here. So that opens our PHP, and this closes our PHP. And we'll put some PHP on the other side of this as well. And close our PHP. So we've got 2 blocks of PHP right here that have nothing inside them. And what we can do is we can create a for loop. So we can say for, and then again, remember all our variables have to have a $sign in front of them. So we can say for I equals 0, I less than 10. Oh, see, I forgot my $sign. I plus plus, that's how you write just increment I once each time. And we can start our for loop with our curly brace, just like you would in other C-like languages. But we can wait to close the curly brace until later. So it thinks of all of these PHP blocks as one consistent block of code. And because it's thinking of this as one consistent block, it's going to repeat everything that's inside this, even if it's something that's not inside PHP code. So what do people think it's going to look like when I hit reload? The same? Okay, so it's probably not going to look the same because we're going to repeat this section 10 times.
Oh.
And what happens is we get 10 item 1s because we just repeated this static thing 10 times. So all the stuff that was inside these curly braces got repeated 10 times. All right, so it would be really great if instead of saying item 1, we could print out some number in here. So you could, put one of these whole PHP blocks, right here where this 1 is, and print out the value of I. But since that's something you probably want to do commonly, there's some nice PHP syntax for doing that. So instead of making these, PHP question mark PHP things, you can actually just do open angle bracket question mark and then an equals, and then put $I, and then the same thing to close it. So an is that right? No, question mark angle bracket to close it. If we do that, we will get 0 through 9. So just like other languages, the arrays are 0 indexed. Great. Any questions about why that worked or what happened there? Sure. Any questions? Oh boy, that's not helpful. Great. So let's cover just a few more things about the language. The only other thing, because it'll come up in what we're doing next, I'm going to cover some more of the array syntax. I'm going to create another pre-section here so we can just read output more easily. The reason I'm doing that is because otherwise HTML all gets stuck together in one paragraph when you have line breaks. But if you put it in pre, the line breaks get rendered. Okay, so let's create just another PHP section. And we can create an array by doing $A equals array. So that's how you create an empty array. And so one thing you can do with an array is arrays in PHP are both like regular numbered arrays in C, and they're also associative arrays. Like you can put, just like you saw up here where we put foo in this get array, you can put other values in the index of the array. So we can say A10, even though we didn't just define the length of the array, we can just say the 10th element equals 4, all right? And then we can var dump A, right? And let's see what we get. So we got an array with one element 10 mapped to 4. Right? So that's sort of what we expected. You can append something to the end of an array by just saying A with empty angle brackets and telling PHP to figure out where to put this. So we can put a 5 in the array. Now if we hit, I didn't put in a var dump. So I'll put this in here. Load. So the second time we got an array with 2 elements, and it decided to put the 5 at 11. So 10 was the last index, and it put it in at 11. If we did this in the opposite order, where we just told it to stick a 5 in wherever, it's going to stick the 5 in at 0. And then it still sticks the 10 in, or the 4 in at 10. And if we then again do this, we get the 6 in at 11. So it uses the highest index to put things in when you do that. And you can also mix these types. So you can say, you can use an associative thing. So you can say foo equals bar, or yeah, let's do that. And then if we dump this, we now get an array that has all this mixture of stuff in it. And so that's fine to do. Great, so that's how arrays work in PHP. Any questions before we take a break from PHP and talk about databases? Yes?
What does doing the empty bracket get
If the thing you're...
is like 2?
So So the way that the array gets stored internally is there's actually two halves to the array. There's the part of the array with integer indexes and the part of the array with associative indexes. And so if we put another one of these in, right here, after we've done foo, it will still put it in at, I think, well, we've already got an 11, so I think it'll be at 12. Yeah. Make sense?
Does PHP do anything different with white space and stuff?
No. I mean, it does white space like JavaScript does. I mean, and like Java does and things like that. I don't think. No, I mean, you need to have semicolons at the end of statements. And so if you have line breaks, white space that is line breaks at the end of statements, it will complain. Yeah. It ought to do what you expect with white space. Any other questions? It is kind of a finicky language, but it does allow you to do some nice things. And you can define functions, you can define classes, it's object-oriented. So you can define classes just like you do in Java. And they're real classes, unlike JavaScript, where they're not really real classes. So for those of you that do object-oriented programming, that stuff works. But that being said, I can't remember the last time I created a class in PHP. I almost never do it. Because I end up writing terrible PHP that looks like this, that's just interspersed with HTML and that sort of thing. And yeah. So, great. So the next thing we need to talk about are databases. So we're going to talk about relational databases. How many of you have had any experience with relational databases other than having used? Okay, so basically no one. All right, so relational databases are kind of like a spreadsheet. But they are very different from a spreadsheet in some certain ways, and so it's important that you understand that. So if you go to your My CS147 page, you'll notice that there's new stuff there now. There's all this new personal MySQL database stuff. And for now, what you can do is you can click on this link, and when you open that up, I've already logged in. When you open that up, it'll look like this. It'll ask you for your username and password. And so you should type in your username and your password on that screen, and it will log you in. Great. And I forgot to delete that database, but that's fine. Anyway, so when you pull this up, you get what is a very useful but very poorly designed application called phpMyAdmin. This is, in fact, all written in PHP, so you can build things this complicated, and also, if you want to, this bad in PHP. What it is it's a front end for administering MySQL databases. And it's a lot easier than using the terminal. You can also do this from the terminal, but I'm betting that nobody in this room wants to see how to do that. So we'll talk about this. So each of you have access to your own database. So the databases you have access to are listed over here. You'll see this one called Information Schema. That is the database that MySQL, like in a very meta way, keeps all of its information about the other databases in. And I guess you can view this. You don't want to. You want to deal with your database, so you'll have something similarly called to jbrand4 _ MySQL. And that is listed in here. Great. All right. Is everyone experiencing success? Fantastic. All right. So you won't have anything listed here. I could go ahead and just delete this so that my life is more like yours. Great. So when you're there, you should see something like this, and it should say no tables found in database. So a relational database, an individual database, consists of, I guess, 0 or more tables, as many tables as you want. And you can sort of think of the tables as like a sheet in Excel. That's sort of one way to think about it. So tables have any number of rows. Each data item you put in them is a row. And those rows will have various fields. So they might have an ID field and a time field. If we're making a chat application, they might have an ID field and a time field and a username field and a message field. And that's, in fact, exactly the schema. That's called a schema, how the table is structured. That's exactly the schema that we'll use when we, hopefully today, get some time to build this chat application. It's not looking promising. Yeah. different tables can have different schemas. That's the whole point of having different tables. So you could have one table that lists all of your users and their passwords, and then you could have another table in your chat application that is the chat log, so all the logs, and so forth. And it's called a relational database because relational database systems make it very fast to connect data between tables. So you can say, you know, I've got the user with this ID in this table. I want to find all of the rows, all of the data in this other table that's from that user. So sort of constructing that relationship between tables. And actually constructing the relationship isn't the hard part of what a relational database is. Making it fast to access that data is the power that a relational database buys you. So if you just put this in some big flat file, like something like a, you know, essentially a Word doc, you'd have to search through the whole Word doc to try and find, you know, all the things that person X said in this log. And relational databases make it very fast to find all of the things that person X said among thousands of people. And in addition to that, they introduce a language that we'll talk about called SQL that makes it very fast for you, once you know SQL, to query those data sources. So does the goal, we talk about that for weeks in a relational database class, but does the goal of relational databases, do you have any questions about why they exist? All right, great. So let's create us a table. My first table. All right, and so then we say number of fields. So we want to know the number of fields that each row is going to have. And this is a very non-committal interface. Even if you put 3 and want a different number, it'll all work out. PHP myadmin is insane. If you specify, say, 3, it will look like this. If you add more, it starts to change formats where it's instead of oriented in columns, it's now oriented in rows. So like I said, you can build terrible stuff with PHP, and this is an example of that. There's all the same things in these, what are now rows and maybe columns for you. I'm going to go back to the view of them having 3. So I'm going to start over here, my first table, and say 3, because it's slightly easier to explain what's going on when we have 3 of them. All right. So, did everybody get something that looks vaguely like this? Great. All right. So, every field has a name, and then all this other associated information. So let's create a simple table. Let's have something called ID. Let's have something called time. We'll call it the time just to make our lives easier. And I'll explain why it will be easier in a second. And we'll call this data. All right, so it's a very simple table. We're going to store that stuff. All right, so one of the things that makes databases able to run fast is giving data types. So you'll note that in all the other programming languages we've been dealing with, things like PHP and JavaScript, we haven't really worried about types. They seem very amorphous. They are not amorphous in database land. So we got to give these things types. So ID, that's going to be, I mean, I'm just making this up. They could be anything, but you got all these types. And again, annoyingly, PHP myadmin doesn't give you the obvious types to use. Since you're going to be building applications for less than 1 million users at a time, you don't need to worry too much about data types. Just use the biggest freaking type you can for whatever you're doing. So don't worry about all these small-sized ints. Just computers are fast these days. They have a lot of megabytes, so just use an int, and that'll make your life easier. So time, we'd like to put that into timestamp. And then data, we're just going to have some character data in our table. So there's a couple different types of, so let me go through a few more of these types. There's this whole set of things that are ints. Ints are usually the right choice. Big ints are absolutely enormous. You can choose them if you want, but ints will probably be fine unless you're dealing with things more than like 4 billion. Doubles are fine. Just use doubles if you need sort of a real valued thing. There's date times and timestamps and times and years. I mean, I don't want to go into details about these things. Just use timestamp or date time. They'll be fine. Yes, great question. So, there's many text types as well. Basically everything that's left here, with the exception of these, are different types of text things. So car, so for, I wish I could explain the history behind these things, but we don't really have time. Anyway, varchar is almost always what you want to use. Varchar, it's called varchar because you can say how much. So databases originally started out life with trying to give programmers lots of tools to make them run really fast on slow computers. And so varchars are variable length text fields. And you say how long you want the maximum length to be. And then when it's stored in the table, it doesn't store for every row. So if you say, if we have a varchar and you say, I want it to be 1,000 characters long. It happens to be the case that in varchars, if you have one record with only one thing in it, with only one character in it, it won't store 1,000 blank characters. If you used a char instead of a varchar, it would store 1,000 blank characters. Right? And if you're trying to make your database run really well and fit into memory and certain memory size things and like page out correctly, then you want your records to all be a predictable size and that makes access faster. Don't worry about it. Computers are fast, really fast. So just use varchar. So the only distinction is if you want to put really, really big things in your database, like if you want to put, so varchars you can use reasonably well up to say 32,000 characters, so a lot of characters. If you want to put like novels in your database, then you want to use something along the text line. So a single text entry, where is it? Oh, a single text entry can hold like 4 gigabytes or something. So if you're putting, yeah. And so basically, the distinction you should only ever use varchar in text. And the distinction you should draw is if it's something you want to search over, like usernames, like if you're putting usernames in, then you want to put those into varchar. MySQL makes it fast to search over them. If it's something where you just want to store a whole bunch of data, like a novel, put it into text, because you're probably not going to search over that, at least in the database. You're not going to use SQL to search over it. Does that distinction make sense? So basically despite how long this long list is, the only 3 types you'll ever use are varchar, int, the only 4 types are varchar, int, one of these time things, and maybe text. And that's all you need to deal with. All right. Great. So there's a whole bunch of other crap on here. What does all this stuff do? Well, mostly, so, I mean, again, part of this is because phpMyAdmin, it's the best thing out there. I'm not giving you junk, but it's not that great. So this is this weird field that sometimes has a purpose. It has a purpose for varchars, where you put how long you want the maximum one to be. Then we have this thing, for ints it doesn't really have a purpose. It sort of does, but pretend like it doesn't. So then there's this weird default thing that it's not clear what it does. And it's only useful for timestamp types. So for timestamp types, you can say, I want the default value of this to be whatever the current time is. So we'll do that. So what that means is the default value that it's going to fill in, if you don't put it in when you enter data, is it'll enter the current time. You could put another default value for these. Like you could have the default value of your varchar field be ASDF, but you probably don't want that. Collation, you probably don't want to worry about that either. That deals with how the database decides to sort information internally. And so, like, if you spoke Esperanto, you could have it sort in Esperanto order. But it'll be fine because computers are fast, so don't worry about it. Attributes, again, you can make your ints, for example, unsigned so that you can store more data. But ints are already enormous, so don't worry about it. So this one is important. So you can say whether you're willing to let a field be empty. So maybe we want our data field to be able to be empty. So we'll say that that's null. And what that means is if we try and insert a record into our database, it'll work if we don't specify data, but it won't work if we don't specify these. Great. All right, so then there's this other crazy field called auto increment, and we want that. So what this does is if you have some integer field and you say auto increment, it will come up with a new value for that field every single time you insert something if you don't specify it. And this turns out to be useful for lots of reasons. It's really nice to have a unique ID for every field in your database, in your table, or for every record in your table, in case you want to connect it to some other database. And it's nice to know that those are unique. And so if you do this auto increment thing and always let it auto increment, you'll always get a unique one. And furthermore, so there's this index column. This is the last thing I'm going to talk about. So databases are fast because of indices. That's the whole reason that they're fast. Basically what an index is you tell the database system which columns you probably want to search by and which columns you probably don't. So in an ideal world, you could build an index on every single column, right? Every single field. And then you could search by any field and it'd be fast. But if you're putting huge amounts of data in some text, like you're putting novels in, you probably don't want to build an index over those because despite the fact that computers are fast, they're not that fast. And so that'll be really big. So you kind of want to pick the things that you want to search by and make indices on those. And so you can define those here. And so when you click on this, there's lots of different kinds of indices. The two classes of indices are unique indices and indices. So these two. And I'm sorry I'm having to go into all this detail, but some of this stuff just sort of has to be explained so you understand what the heck is going on the screen. So unique means this index, this column, this field, will never have the same value twice. And you can only have a unique index if that's true. And if it only has a value once, or 0 times, it makes it much faster to search. So the database can sort of optimize for that. If you might have a data more than once, you can use index. So those are two types. Full text only works for novels. It only works on text fields, and it makes it faster to search your novel. But it stores it differently, so it doesn't make it as fast as if it were. Yeah. And then there's this thing called primary. And you only get one of those per database, and it's unique. And so it's always nice in a table to have an ID field that is auto-incremented and is the primary key. If you don't have something else that's unique to be the primary key, and that's you connect to other databases. I know that was a whole bunch of detail, but I wanted to make sure that when you're working with this to create databases, you don't get scared about all the stuff on here and realize that you can ignore most of it. Any questions about all that? All right, I realize that was a lot, but we should have stuff here now, and we can say, okay, so this defines our database schema. So let's hit. So this is another thing that's confusing about PHP, and I admit. I never know which of these to hit, and I always hit the wrong one because it seems like I should hit go. I love what I just put in, but if you do that, it will do this thing here that says or add one field, and then it adds another field to your database. But if you leave this totally blank, you can hit save, and it will still only put 3 fields in your database. And it luckily saves all of your data. All right, so something exciting happens here. This code is up here that got automatically built. And so you use this WYSIWYG interface to create your, well, not really WYSIWYG, this graphical interface to create your database. But you could have done it from the command line by writing this code. And this code is, in fact, SQL. So this is the language, SQL, that we're learning now. And this is one of the great things about PHP is one of the great things about PHP-MyAdmin is whenever you do something with PHP-MyAdmin, it shows you the code that would have done that same thing. And so that's not particularly useful in terms of creating tables because you probably won't ever do it by writing code. But for other things we do, like insert data into the database or search for data or things like that, you can sort of prototype your search through this sort of WYSIWYG editor, and then you'll know what code you want to write in your actual application because it'll show it to you and you'll know it'll work right. So that's kind of nice. Any questions about that? So this is exactly the same thing that we typed into the form. Great. All right. So let's put some data in our database. So we do that by inserting, and you get this great GUI for putting stuff in. So now remember that these two things, we told it something to put in there if we didn't do anything. So the ID was going to be auto-incremented, and the timestamp was going to get the current timestamp. So I'll put something in here, and I can put something else in here. Right, and it automatically updates the UI so it doesn't set it to null, and it doesn't have this ignore thing clicked. And all these go buttons do the same darn thing. And the confusing thing is, on this screen, go is the right thing you want to click, whereas on the other screen it was save, and go did something weird. So anyway, you can click go. And now you've got two things in your database. And what you see here is the insert statement that got written. So this is the same sort of insert statement that you're going to be writing in your application. And you'll notice that SQL's amazing, and that it looks exactly like English. So it says insert into, and it says the table name, and then it says what columns you're going to insert things into, and then it says the values and what you're going to insert into them. So this looks like English, sort of. The thing is, the idea of SQL was to produce an English-like language for creating these queries. The problem is it's a very rigid language, unlike English. So it's not really like English at all. But it looks like English, sort of. So this is SQL. All right, so we've got stuff in the database. Now we can click Browse, and sure enough, there's the data, and it's filled in with the time. And it's filled in with the correct time, in the correct time zone, which I find amazing. Because these servers aren't in this time zone. But anyway, so you can see that we automatically got these auto-incremented, and we've got our data in there. So what's great about SQL? Well, we can perform searches over the data really easily. So we can say, give me all the things with ID 2. Oh, that's a big number. And it does, right? And so this shows you exactly the SQL query you'd execute to get that, right? And so this actually does start to look a little bit more like English. You can say select star, that means select everything. And here's where you'd specify the columns from my first table, where the ID is equal to 2. And you can obviously, so we can start playing around with the SQL. We can click Edit. Boy, this is annoying. And we can write different SQL. So let me see if I can make parts of this bigger. That's really annoying. But so we can say, I only want to see the data column from my first table, where ID is less than 2. And so we get, and these queries operate insanely quickly. So that's sort of the point of databases. And if we had a million times as many rows in here, it would still be just as fast to get these back. So that's what's great about storing your data this way. It stays organized, and so forth. And you can select from it, you can insert into it, and so forth. Any questions about the joys of databases? Yes. So that is a great question. So remember when I didn't make that field called time and I instead called the time? So there are two ways of escaping. So yeah, in general, you don't need quotes around anything in SQL. The only time you need quotes around things is when they might be interpreted as something other than a variable. So it turns out that time is a built-in function in SQL. And so if you have something called time, then you need backticks around it. So more confusingly, and this is why you probably want to generate your SQL code by playing with the UI. That's why I introduced the UI. But more confusingly, things that are variables in the database, so like names of tables or names of databases or things like that, get backticks around them if you want to use quotes. And things that are literals in your query, so like the number 2 or things that you're inserting, get regular single quotes around them. So they're different because everything's different in every single programming language. And so that's the way it works there. Yeah, so great. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Clear as mud? That's great. So that is the next question. That is the next thing we're going to talk about. So the reason we want to have a SQL database is all of these PHP things. So we were doing this PHP stuff, and it seemed great because stuff was executing on the server, but it still had the same problem that nothing lived around for a long time, right? Like just like nothing lived around in JavaScript when you hit reload, it also didn't live around the web server. It only stayed there while the page was being rendered and sent. So you got to store your data somewhere else, and you can store it in a database. And MySQL makes it really easy to connect to databases. So the bad news is we're running out of time. The good news is I will show you code instead of write code with you that does this sort of thing. Oh boy, except we're going to have to very quickly, remember that table that I deleted called chats? We need to recreate that table. Oh, but we can do that easily. All right, so I was going to show you how to create a table for a chat room, but in prediction that this wouldn't work out, we've got this great folder called chat done. If you all go to my chat done, things will probably break. But there's this thing called chattable.sql, and this is the schema for the table that we need for our chat room. So we can go here, and we can go to our database. We can click on the SQL tab that lets us type in any SQL we want, and that didn't work at all. We can copy and paste this, and hit go, and magically we now have a new table called chats. And it's got all these great things in it. So it's got ID and time and nick and message, and it has current timestamp and auto increment and everything. And so now, if you are doing this in your own world, so there's going to be some other things. This is totally gonna break. But all right, so I'll show you what this looks like, and it'll probably break. I apologize in advance, but. And if other people are already on this page, that didn't do at all what I wanted. It's probably already broken. But if you go to chat done, there's an awesome chat room here. I can't even spell my name. No idea why that didn't work. Sorry, that didn't work. Let's put some data in here real quick. Joel, hello, someone, hi, go. Let's see if this works now. That totally didn't work. All right. Well, anyway, I'm going to answer your question. Not very well, but I'm sure going to answer it. So, you connect to a database in PHP by calling a function that connects to a database. There's this great function right here called dumpdb. And this great, what do you call it, file. Yeah, and it's got some stuff in it. And it's got this included file called connectdb. Oh, that's the problem. Oh, we're totally going to get this to work. All right, so there's a file called connectdb template, which I put in the source control, so you should all have that, but I didn't put the actual connection code because you have to put your password in there. And you should never check your password into Subversion because then it's out there for the whole world. So, I totally did this right, not wrong. So my password is a Berkeley-centric password, Go Bears, because no one at Stanford would ever guess that. And I'll save that to a different file, connectdb. So that was the file it was actually expecting. Great, and you, oh, that's really not what I wanted to do. Connectdb.php. All right, now it is saved as that. So this is the code that connects to the database. And you should put your connection information in here to play with your database. If you all start playing with my database, which will work if you type this in, it will be chaotic. But anyway, so you have code that calls connect to the database that creates this connection object. This is how you handle errors. All of this code is readily available on the web. If you search for PHP MySQL query, you will get exactly the code you would want. MySQL query will have a great example of how to connect to a database and do a query. It's all in there. And in fact, the best example is in Fetch Associative. This shows you how to do everything you could ever want to do with a database, right in this one file. So basically you connect, you select the database you want to use, which is your database name. You'll see that in your thing. And then you write your code. So here's our query. Here's the results. We loop over them and return some stuff. And now, ostensibly, we have a chat room. Hey, look at that, we do. And you can all go to this, and it will break. Because I bet that the server can't handle that many people. But you can go to this, and hopefully Rio will talk through how to build this fantastic chat room. It's great because it involves all kinds of different things. So it involves Ajax, it involves getting data out of a database, putting data in a database, and so forth. You also have all of the code now you can check out and get your own chat room working and inspect how the code works. So, any questions given that we didn't explain totally how that works? All right. Well, I'm happy to take. Look at that. That's some valuable feedback. Great. So if anybody has individual questions, you can swing on by now. I got to leave right at 4, but I'm happy to help you guys out as much as I can. It's been fun. You're in great hands with Rio. He will make everything that didn't make sense today make sense the next time. I'm certain of it. Yeah, and we're always happy to help, so send us emails if you've got questions. We'll try and get through as much more stuff as we can. There's a lot to cover. Thanks a lot. Oh, please. No. But if you have questions, swing on by.